Your dad works for NASA? That's ridiculous. You're Asian. The words, sharp as shattered glass, sliced through the normal classroom chatter. Silence crashed down. Hard. Every head seemed to turn, a sea of curious, confused, and maybe even hostile faces staring right at me. My face flushed hot, a stupid, betraying wave of heat creeping up my neck. I felt pinned, like a butterfly stuck to a board. Embarrassment warred with a sudden, fierce resentment that tightened my chest and made it hard to breathe. What could I even say? My name is Elena Park. At least, that's what most people call me here in Oakhaven. Back home, or what used to be home in Korea, I was Park Eugene. But Elena rolls off southern tongues easier, less likely to get mangled into something unrecognizable. So, Elena I became. Just another adjustment in a life full of them since my parents brought us to the small town nestled deep in the humid green of the American South nearly 10 years ago. I was 12 now, navigating the treacherous waters of 6th grade at Oakhaven Middle, and most days, I felt like the only ship flying a foreign flag in the entire harbor. There were a couple of Hispanic kids, maybe another Asian face drifted through once in a blue moon, but mostly, it was just me, the lone Korean girl trying to blend into a landscape that wasn't built for my colors. This wasn't the first time my identity felt like an ill-fitting coat, something that made people stare or whisper. Little things, mostly. Jokes about my lunch smelling weird. Exaggerated imitations of my parents' accents. The usual ignorance you try to shrug off. You learn to build walls, keep your head down, find solace in books or the few friends who see you and not just the different kid. But this felt different. It wasn't just ignorance, it was disbelief aimed straight at my family, at my dad. The implication hung heavy in the air. Someone like us couldn't possibly be part of something as amazing, as American, as NASA. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? How easily prejudice can masquerade as simple disbelief. How quick people are to draw lines around who belongs where, who gets to dream which dreams. Maybe, just maybe, the best answer wasn't anger, wasn't shouting back. Maybe the most powerful weapon was something quieter. Something like proof. Calm, undeniable proof. That thought was just a flicker then, a tiny spark in the confusion and hurt. I didn't know it yet, but that spark was about to be fanned into a flame by an upcoming school event. I'd faced whispers and odd looks before, but I wasn't prepared for how a simple school project would turn my world upside down. Stars in my eyes, stones in my path, growing up different. That storm I mentioned? The one brewing under the surface of Oakhaven Middle? It finally broke during what should have been a totally normal school assignment. But before I dive into that particular disaster, you probably need to understand a bit more about my world. Especially about my dad, Dr. Jae-ho Kim. My dad is, well, he's brilliant. He came over from Seoul with dreams bigger than the Pacific Ocean, armed with an insane intellect and a quiet determination that I still see in his eyes when he's tackling a tough problem. He navigated the maze of grad school, earned his PhD here in the States, and then landed the kind of job that sounds like something out of a movie, aerospace systems engineer at NASA. Yeah. That NASA. To most people, that probably conjures images of astronauts and moon landings. To me, it meant evenings spent sprawled on the living room floor, him patiently explaining the mind-bending physics of rocket propulsion using soy sauce bottles and chopsticks, or sketching the trajectory of a Mars probe on the back of a napkin. He never dumbed it down, not really. He just translated the universe into a language I could understand. Our attic wasn't just storage space, it was mission control. Cobwebs shared space with meticulously assembled model rockets, the air thick with the smell of wood glue and potential energy. Diagrams of propulsion systems and satellite arrays were taped haphazardly to the slanted ceiling beams. While other girls my age were plastering their walls with boy bands or movie stars, my sacred space was decorated with the architecture of space exploration. Weekends weren't for malls or sleepovers, they were for calculating fuel-to-weight ratios, debating the merits of solid versus liquid boosters, dreaming of distant planets. My dad ignited that spark in me, a burning curiosity about the cosmos that felt more real, more exciting than anything else Oakhaven had to offer. It set me apart, though. I knew that. My passion wasn't exactly mainstream 6th grade girl conversation fodder. School was okay. Mostly. I wasn't a total pariah. I had Sarah and Maria, thank goodness. They liked my kimchi jjigae theories on parallel universes and didn't flinch when my homemade kimbap looked different from their PB&JS. With them, I could almost forget I was the perpetual outsider. But outside that tiny bubble? It was different. There was always a low hum of otherness. In elementary school, it was mostly clumsy stuff, kids pulling their eyes sideways, giggling at my attempts to wrap my tongue around certain English sounds. I tried the laugh along approach, the pretend it doesn't hurt defense. Because what else could you do? But middle school felt sharper. The lines felt clearer. The whispers weren't always behind hands anymore. The curiosity, when it came, often felt less like genuine interest and more like poking at something strange in a zoo. The prejudice wasn't just background noise, sometimes it felt like the main broadcast. And my dad's job? The thing I was most proud of? It became another complication, another target painted on my back. Saying my dad works at NASA should have been awesome. Instead, it often landed with a thud of disbelief. You could practically see the mental calculation: Korean girl plus small southern town plus NASA equals does not compute. It wasn't just the wow factor being questioned, it felt like our right to be connected to something so significant, so American, was being subtly, or not so subtly, denied. My pride felt tangled with this weird sense of defensiveness, this need to prove something that should have been simple fact. It was exhausting. So, when the announcement came for the annual parent job presentation day, a familiar knot of dread tightened in my stomach. I loved my dad's job, I truly did. It was woven into the fabric of who I was. But explaining it to them? Yeah, that felt like walking right back into the storm I was desperately trying to avoid. The presentation that broke the silence. That knot of dread I mentioned? The one that twisted my insides just thinking about parent job presentation day? Yeah, it wasn't wrong. The day arrived exactly as predicted, heavy with the post-lunch slump and the faint, lingering smell of lukewarm tater tots and disinfectant from the cafeteria downstairs. Mrs. Davison, our 6th grade teacher, clapped her hands together, trying to corral the restless energy. Her smile seemed maybe a little too bright, a little strained around the edges, like she knew this annual exercise could be a minefield. All right, class, settle down. Eyes up front. Time for our wonderful presentations. Wonderful. Right. The usual suspects went first. Mike Johnson proudly showed off pictures of his dad in full firefighter gear, hose aimed like a cannon. Easy applause. Jessica Miller's mom was a yoga instructor, a photo of her doing a complicated pretzel pose got appreciative oohs and ahs. Then Leo described how his uncle managed the kitchen at the local diner, complete with a funny anecdote about a pancake disaster. More clapping, friendly laughter. It was all so normal. So accepted. Each polite round of applause felt like another tick of a clock counting down to my own personal doom. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the cheerful backdrop. My palms were slick with sweat as I clutched the carefully drawn diagram I'd stayed up late perfecting. Just say it clearly, I told myself. Be proud. Don't stumble. Elena Park? Mrs. Davison scanned her list, her gaze landing on me. Time stopped. Or maybe it just stretched out, taffy-like. Taking a shaky breath, I pushed my chair back and walked towards the front, acutely aware of every single pair of eyes following my progress. My sneakers squeaked embarrassingly on the linoleum. Reaching the board, I fumbled slightly with the thumbtacks, my fingers suddenly clumsy. I tacked up my drawing, a simplified, colorful schematic of a multi-stage rocket. Okay. Deep breath. Face the class. Hi, I started, my voice thinner than I wanted. I'm Elena. Today I'm going to talk about my dad's job. I swallowed, forcing myself to make eye contact with a few classmates near the front. My dad, Dr. Jae-ho Kim, he works at NASA. He's an aerospace systems engineer. Silence. Not the impressed silence I'd foolishly daydreamed about. No wows or gasps. This was a different beast entirely. A heavy, confused silence. You could feel the collective mental gears grinding. NASA? Her dad? Then, it started. A snicker from the back corner, quickly stifled. A nervous giggle from near the window. And then, the whispers, insidious and spreading like weeds. No way. She's totally lying. NASA? For real? My carefully rehearsed confidence crumbled. The heat rushed back to my face, hotter this time, prickling under my skin. My eyes darted around the room, catching smirks, raised eyebrows, blatant disbelief. These were kids I ate lunch near, kids I passed in the halls every day. And then Brad Jenkins, self-appointed king of the back row, decided to hold court. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, a lazy, mocking grin spreading across his face. NASA? He drawled, loud enough for the entire class, including Mrs. Davison, to hear clearly. Seriously, Park? What's he really do there? Scrub the toilets for the actual engineers or something? The classroom erupted. Not just giggles now, but full-blown laughter. Loud, sharp, and pointed directly at me. It wasn't even a particularly witty insult, but Brad had given them permission, broken the dam of polite skepticism. My stomach plummeted. It felt like I'd been physically struck. Words evaporated from my brain. All my planned explanations about propulsion systems and orbital mechanics vanished, replaced by a roaring white noise of pure humiliation. Anger flared, hot and useless, trapped behind a wall of shock. I wanted to yell, to defend my dad, to call Brad the idiot he was, but my throat closed up. Tears pricked the corners of my eyes. Don't cry, Elena. Don't cry. I risked a glance at Mrs. Davison. Her lips were pressed into a thin line, a flicker of, what? Annoyance? Discomfort? Indecision? Definitely crossed her face. Okay, Brad, she said, her voice lacking any real authority. That's enough. It wasn't enough. Not even close. She turned back to me, her expression shifting to one of brisk dismissal. Thank you, Elena. Very interesting. Her eyes avoided mine. Do you have anything else to add? The question was purely rhetorical. Before I could even shake my head, she was already moving on, scanning her list again. All right then. David, you're next. I stumbled back to my seat, the laughter echoing in my ears like sharp little jabs, even though it had mostly subsided into snickers and whispers. My diagram felt suddenly childish, foolish. I sank into my chair, pulling my hair forward like a curtain, wishing I could just melt right through the floor and disappear. The rest of the school day passed in a suffocating blur of shame and simmering, impotent anger. A father's strength, a daughter's hope. I didn't even feel like going to the library, my usual after-school refuge where the quiet shelves offered some peace between the dusty covers of forgotten books. Not today. Today the silence felt too loud, echoing the hollowness inside me. So I just wandered, kicking at loose pebbles on the cracked sidewalk, Brad Jenkins' sneering voice and that awful wave of laughter replaying on a cruel, endless loop in my head. Scrub the toilets for the actual engineers? The words felt like physical blows, leaving invisible bruises. How could they? How could Mrs. Davison just let it happen? My feet, acting on autopilot, eventually carried me up the familiar walkway to my own front porch, the cheerful yellow door feeling like a portal to another, safer dimension. I pushed it open, the scent of garlic, ginger, and soy sauce, my dad's signature stir-fry aroma, wrapping around me like a warm hug. A wave of relief washed over me, quickly followed by anxiety. He was home early, usually, Mom beat him back from her part-time job at the university admin office. I saw him standing at the stove, humming slightly off-key as he expertly tossed vegetables in a battered wok. He turned, a welcoming smile starting on his face, but it faltered the instant he saw me. His eyes, those sharp, intelligent eyes that could decipher complex orbital mechanics, instantly registered the storm cloud clinging to me. No need for questions. He just knew. Ajana, he said quietly, using my Korean name, his voice a soft anchor in my turbulent emotions. Rough day at school? He turned down the flame under the wok, the sizzling fading to a gentle simmer, and guided me towards the small kitchen table. He pulled out a chair for me, then sat opposite, his calm presence a stark contrast to the chaos swirling inside me. "Tell Appa what happened." And just like that, the dam broke. The whole miserable story spilled out between choked sobs and ragged breaths, the nervous excitement before my presentation, the pride I tried so hard to project, the chilling silence that met my announcement, the whispers, Brad's ugly, targeted words, the explosive laughter, Mrs. Davison's quick, inadequate shutdown. And then, the awful, shameful thought I'd been fighting surfaced, tumbling out before I could stop it. Maybe it would just be easier, I hiccuped, the words tasting like ash, if you just worked at the bank or something normal? I gasped, horrified at my own words, clapping a hand over my mouth. Easier for who? Certainly not for him. I braced for disappointment, maybe even anger. Instead, after a moment where his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, his expression softened into something else entirely, empathy. He reached across the worn Formica tabletop and gently covered my trembling hand with his own. His hand was warm, steady. Solid. "Elena," he said, his voice low but firm, cutting through my self-pity. "You did nothing wrong. Nothing. You told the truth about my work, and that is something to be proud of. Always." The simple validation was like cool water on a burn, soothing but not erasing the sting. But why, Appa? The question felt raw. Why wouldn't they believe me? Why laugh? Is it because I'm, Asian? Korean? Different? He sighed, a soft sound that seemed to carry the weight of years. Perhaps partly, little star, he admitted, not shying away from it. NASA seems very far away, very grand, to many people. It's outside their everyday world. And sometimes, his gaze drifted past me for a second, thoughtful. It is easier for people to disbelieve something, or someone, that doesn't quite fit their picture of how things should be. An Asian face designing rocket engines, maybe that picture is still new, still uncomfortable for some here. He looked back at me. It doesn't make their reaction right, Elena. Not at all. But perhaps understanding the why can take away some of its power. He paused, then his eyes met mine with a new intensity. So, maybe I should come talk to your class myself? My head snapped up. What? Come to school? Really, Appa? My voice squeaked with surprise. But, your work? You're always so busy. And? A cold dread washed over me. What if they say those things to you? What if they laugh at you too? The thought of exposing him, my brilliant, respected father, to that same ugly ridicule was unbearable. He offered a small, reassuring smile, though his eyes remained serious. I can make time, Elena. And you don't need to worry about me. He leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping conspiratorially. This isn't about showing off, understand? It's just about presenting the facts. Calmly. And he squeezed my hand, letting them know my daughter speaks the truth. He added, almost as an aside, his gaze holding a hint of shared history, besides, this wouldn't be the first time I've encountered certain misunderstandings in this country. Surprise warred with a terrifying, fluttering hope. Could he really do it? Just walk in there and fix it? Make them see? It felt impossible, audacious. But the image of him standing tall in front of the class, undeniable proof in person, began to push back against the crushing weight of the day's humiliation. It was scary. Terrifying, actually. But maybe, just maybe. That night, eating the spicy jjigae Dad had finished making, comfort food for a bruised heart, a different kind of fire started to burn inside me. Not just the helpless anger from earlier, but a flickering flame of fragile hope. Maybe, just maybe, this could work. Tomorrow, I decided, swallowing my fear alongside the savory broth. Tomorrow, I would ask Mrs. Davison. Dr. Kim goes to school, proof in person. The next morning, my stomach felt like it was performing complex aerial maneuvers worthy of a NASA mission itself. But Dad's quiet confidence from the night before had armed me with a sliver of courage.
Before the chaos of the first bell, clutching my backpack straps like lifelines, I made my way to Mrs. Davison's imposing oak desk.
Mrs. Davison?
My voice trembled slightly. She looked up from her planner, her expression neutral.
My dad. Appa, he heard about the presentations yesterday.
I took a shaky breath.
He works at NASA, like I said. And he thought maybe he could come talk to the class? If it's okay? About what he does?
I finished in a rush, bracing myself, watching her face anxiously for any flicker of dismissal.
Her eyebrows shot up in genuine surprise.
Then, something shifted in her expression. A touch of pink colored her cheeks, and she leaned forward slightly, her voice softer than usual.
Oh. Elena. Your father? Dr. Kim, is it? I nodded mutely. Why, yes.
Yes, of course.
That would be wonderful.
She paused, fiddling with a pen.
Actually, Elena, she lowered her voice a little more, glancing around the emptying hallway. I felt quite badly about how things unfolded during your time yesterday.
Some of those comments were completely unacceptable, and I should have handled it better. Relief, sharp and unexpected, washed over me, quickly followed by a surge of hopeful anticipation. Having your father come in, she continued, straightening up, her teacher voice back, would be a fantastic learning opportunity for everyone. Please tell him we'd be delighted. The next couple of days were a blur of nervous energy. One minute I was buzzing with excitement, picturing my dad wowing the class with tales of space exploration. The next, my stomach would plummet, imagining Brad Jenkins's sneering face or the awkward silence of disbelief. What if they were still horrible?
What if they embarrassed him?
On the morning he was scheduled to come, I arrived at school extra early, meticulously tidying my already neat desk, arranging my pens in a perfect row, smoothing down my ponytail for the 10th time.
Breathe, Elena. Appa is calm. Appa is smart. It would be okay.
Probably. Right on cue, just before third period, our social studies block, the classroom door opened.
Silence fell like a switch being flipped.
Dr. Jae-ho Kim, my father, stepped inside. He wasn't in his usual faded university sweatshirt and comfortable jeans.
He wore a neatly pressed dark suit, a crisp white shirt, and polished shoes. He looked important. Professional. And hanging prominently around his neck on a blue lanyard was the undeniable proof, his official NASA identification badge, the iconic blue and red vector logo glinting under the fluorescent lights.
He offered Mrs. Davison a brief, polite smile and a nod, then stood quietly near the front, his calm presence instantly commanding a different kind of attention. The usual classroom buzz died completely.
Kids sat up straighter.
Eyes, wide and curious, were fixed on him. I saw Sarah give me a quick, excited thumbs up. Even Brad Jenkins, though attempting a facade of boredom, kept stealing glances, his usual slouch slightly less pronounced. The air crackled not with mockery, but with genuine, palpable intrigue.
Mrs. Davison made the introduction. Class, I'm very pleased to introduce Elena's father, Dr. Jae-ho Kim.
Dr. Kim is an aerospace systems engineer at NASA, and he has very kindly taken time out of his busy schedule to share a little about his fascinating work with us.
Dad stepped forward, a faint, warm smile touching his lips.
His voice, when he spoke, was exactly as I knew it, calm, measured, with that slight, precise Korean cadence that suddenly sounded incredibly distinguished in the quiet room.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. As Mrs. Davison said, I'm Elena's Appa, her father.
He gave me a quick, reassuring glance that steadied my racing heart. I've been fortunate enough to work at NASA for about 10 years now.
No boasting, just simple fact. He didn't dive into overwhelming technical jargon.
Instead, he talked about the ideas behind his work, the challenge of designing engines powerful enough to escape Earth's gravity but efficient enough for long journeys, the intricate dance of calculating orbital paths to distant planets, the teamwork involved in building robotic explorers destined for places humans couldn't yet reach. He held up a couple of laminated diagrams, a simplified cutaway of a rocket engine showing the combustion chamber, another illustrating how satellites stay in orbit. He explained thrust and trajectory using clear analogies, his hands moving expressively. The condescending wall of disbelief that had met my presentation seemed to visibly crumble as the kids leaned in, captivated.
His passion, though quiet, was undeniable and infectious.
Then, he paused, letting his words settle. His gaze swept across the young faces, his expression gentle but serious. Now, he began, his voice softening slightly. Elena, my daughter, Megan, mentioned that when she proudly shared about my job yesterday, some of you found it, perhaps surprising.
Maybe even hard to believe.
He didn't single anyone out, but his eyes lingered for a moment on the back row. Perhaps you look at me, and you wonder how someone with my background, someone whose family comes from Korea, could be part of something like NASA.
He let the implicit question hang in the air for a beat.
I didn't come here today to show off, or to make anyone feel bad. I came because I believe the world is a very big, very complex, and very wonderful place, full of endless possibilities. Dreams, he emphasized, can be achieved in many different ways, by many different kinds of people, from many different places.
His eyes found mine again.
Elena, like all of you, is growing up here, studying, learning, dreaming her own dreams. So please, his voice was earnest, appealing, don't ever dismiss someone, or doubt their truth, simply because their life, their family, or their story sounds unfamiliar or different from your own.
Be curious. Ask questions. Seek to understand.
The truth, he finished with a small smile, is usually much more interesting, and much more hopeful, than prejudice. He finished speaking. The silence that followed was profound, heavy with thought, utterly different from the tense, mocking silence that had greeted my presentation just days before.
No one giggled. No one whispered.
Then, from the side of the room, Sarah started clapping, tentatively at first.
Maria joined in.
And soon, prompted by Mrs. Davison's enthusiastic lead, "Thank you, Dr. Kim, for such an inspiring talk." The entire class was applauding, the sound washing over me in a wave of overwhelming relief and fierce, bursting pride. My heart felt like it might actually launch right out of my chest and into orbit. The ripple effect, apologies, curiosity, and a father's past. As my dad gathered his papers and diagrams from the front table, shaking Mrs. Davison's hand with quiet professionalism, the classroom remained unusually still. The enthusiastic applause had faded, leaving behind a sort of thoughtful quiet I hadn't experienced in that room before, certainly not after my presentation debacle. It wasn't an awkward silence this time, but something contemplative.
I risked a glance towards the back row. Brad Jenkins wasn't smirking anymore.
He was intently examining the worn pattern on his desk, his neck looking a bit red.
Interesting.
Mrs. Davison walked over to where I sat, her usual slightly flustered energy replaced by a genuine warmth in her eyes as they met mine directly. "Elena," she said softly, bending down slightly.
"Thank you so much for arranging for your father to visit.
That was truly valuable, a wonderful experience for all of us." There was an unspoken apology lingering in her gaze, a silent acknowledgement of her failure the other day, and I offered a small, tentative smile in return.
Maybe she got it now. Maybe.
The real shift, though, wasn't just the immediate quiet or Mrs. Davison's belated warmth.
It unfolded later, in the chaotic shuffle between classes, amidst the slamming of locker doors and the usual hallway roar.
First, Callie, one of the girls who'd definitely been giggling during my presentation, sidled up to me near the water fountain, looking uncharacteristically awkward. "Hey, Elena," she mumbled, fiddling with the strap of her backpack.
Your dad is, like, really cool."
She shuffled her feet, avoiding my eyes.
"So, sorry. About, the other day."
She finally looked up, a flush rising on her cheeks.
"I guess I don't know, it sounded so crazy, I thought you were lying. Anyway, I was wrong. An actual apology. Delivered clumsily, maybe, but sincerely."
It felt huge. Later, Jessie, who rarely spoke to anyone outside her small circle, caught me after math.
"Elena, that stuff your dad showed, about the robots on Mars? Is that what he actually works on? That's insane. What kind of science do you even need to study to do something like that?" Genuine curiosity. Not a trace of mockery. Amazing.
Of course, it wasn't like Dad's visit had magically erased every trace of prejudice from Oak Haven Middle.
Miracles don't happen that fast.
I still caught a couple of Brad's usual buddies rolling their eyes as I walked past later, and I overheard one mutter something like, "So what? Big deal is Dad works for NASA, still weird. You can't expect everyone to change their stripes overnight, maybe ever."
Some roots of ignorance run deep. But the main thing? The heavy, suffocating blanket of Elena Park, the liar from that weird family, had definitely lifted.
It was gone.
Replaced by, well, something new.
Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was a grudging sort of respect, maybe just confusion.
But the automatic disbelief, the instant dismissal tied directly to my Korean face and my immigrant father?
That had been fundamentally challenged. It had been proven wrong, not with shouting or anger, but with calm facts and quiet dignity.
Just like Dad always believed,
yelling back just makes people defensive, showing them, letting them see the truth laid out plainly, that's what has real power. It doesn't just counter the lie, it plants a seed of doubt about the prejudice itself. That evening, the atmosphere at home felt lighter, too, like a low-grade fever had finally broken. While we were cleaning up after dinner, the kitchen filled with the comforting steam from the dishwasher, I finally worked up the courage to ask about the hint he'd dropped earlier.
"Appa,"
I began, carefully drying a plate, you said you'd encountered
misunderstandings before?"
He paused, looking out the window above the sink for a long moment, his expression turning reflective. Then he turned back to me, leaning against the counter.
"And he told me things I hadn't known.
Stories from his graduate school days, being the lone international student in some of his advanced engineering seminars.
Professors who made thinly veiled jokes questioning if someone from the East could truly grasp the complex, Western concepts of aerospace engineering.
Colleagues who subtly excluded him from informal study groups or seemed hesitant to rely on his calculations for critical project components. He even spoke of subtle biases early in his NASA career, the quiet but persistent need he felt to work twice as hard, to be twice as meticulous, just to achieve the same level of trust and recognition as his American-born peers. He didn't tell the stories with bitterness, more with a sort of weary, matter-of-fact resignation mixed with undeniable resilience. Hearing about his struggles, it didn't magically erase the sting of my own humiliation, but it did something else. It forged a new kind of connection between us, a shared thread in the complex tapestry of the immigrant experience in America. It wasn't just my isolated incident, it was part of a larger, ongoing narrative. Knowing he had navigated those prejudiced waters, faced down those doubts, and still emerged as this brilliant, respected scientist who helped send machines to other planets, it filled me with a fierce, quiet resolve.
Hearing my dad's stories didn't discourage me, it fueled me. The prejudice was real, insidious, and exhausting.
But so was the possibility of overcoming it, not with rage, but with excellence and quiet truth. His journey paved the way for mine. And my own journey into science, into proving what I was capable of, felt like it was just beginning. Launching forward, science, ambition, and owning my story. That newfound resolve, that sense of connection forged through shared experience, wasn't just a warm feeling inside, it felt like rocket fuel igniting in my veins. And it translated directly into action just a few days later when Mrs. Davison announced the big assignment for the semester, the Independent Science Fair project. As she outlined the requirements, research, hypothesis, experiment or model, presentation board, a familiar buzz filled the room. Kids started chattering about baking soda volcanoes, plant growth experiments, building simple circuits. Standard middle school stuff. When Mrs. Davison got to me, asking for my preliminary topic idea, I didn't hesitate. No nervous stammer this time. "I want to research the history and future of Mars exploration," I said, my voice clear and steady. I braced myself instinctively, scanning the room for the usual flicker of smirks or eye rolls.
Nothing.
Instead, Jessie leaned across the aisle, her eyes wide with genuine interest.
"Whoa, Mars? That's awesome, Elena. Since your dad works at NASA and all, you can probably get, like, secret inside info, right?" It was said with breathless excitement, not a hint of the previous sarcasm or suspicion. Mike Johnson chimed in from the row behind, "Man, you're really serious about space, aren't you?" It wasn't mockery, it sounded almost like admiration? Or at least acknowledgement.
That simple statement, devoid of the usual unspoken for an Asian girl subtext, felt like a seismic shift.
A world away from the classroom atmosphere just weeks before. Progress. Small, maybe, but definitely progress.
Suddenly, the science project wasn't just another assignment to survive, it was an opportunity one grabbed with both hands. This wasn't about proving the doubters wrong anymore, Dad had already done the heavy lifting there.
This was purely for me. Weekends transformed. Dad and I weren't just tinkering with model rockets in the attic, we were deep diving into the real complexities.
We spent hours navigating the official NASA website, reading mission reports with impenetrable acronyms I slowly started to decipher, watching interviews with intense-looking planetary scientists, and analyzing stunning high-resolution images beamed back from Martian rovers. We watched documentaries about the grueling physical and psychological demands of astronaut training. I learned about the fundamental differences between liquid hydrogen and hypergolic propellants, the engineering challenges of designing radiation shielding for interplanetary travel, the constant innovation required to build machines capable of surviving hostile alien landscapes.
The more I learned, the more I realized how vast the universe of knowledge was, how much I didn't know. But instead of feeling daunting, it was exhilarating.
My passion, validated and now unobstructed, burned brighter than ever. There was another subtle shift, too, one I noticed during regular science classes. Before the visit, if I asked a question that was maybe a bit complex, I'd often get a non-answer, or worse, that pitying look that silently screamed, "Bless her heart, of course she wouldn't understand."
Now,
if I ventured a question about escape velocity or the composition of Jupiter's atmosphere, heads turned towards me with a different kind of look.
expectation.
Like, oh, Elena knows this stuff, she's the NASA kid's daughter. It carried its own weird pressure, this assumption of expertise, this new label.
But honestly,
it was infinitely better than the label of liar or the heavy cloak of dismissal based purely on prejudice.
Infinitely.
This whole journey, the initial sting, the humiliation, my dad's quiet strength, the gradual shift in perception, it crystallized something within me. My love for space wasn't just a hobby inherited from my dad anymore.
It felt like my path. My ambition.
I didn't just want to learn about space exploration, I wanted to be a part of it someday. Maybe designing those next-generation Mars rovers, maybe analyzing data from distant telescopes, maybe something else entirely.
The specific job title wasn't the point.
The point was the drive to contribute, to be one of the people asking the big questions and searching for the answers out there among the stars. And just as importantly, it ignited a fierce determination to challenge any voice, whether internal or external, that ever dared to whisper, "You can't do that."
Why the heck not? Why couldn't I?
Thinking back on my dad's stories of facing skepticism in his own career, it hit me how important representation truly is. Seeing people who look like you, whether Korean American or any other underestimated group, thriving in fields like STEM, it dismantles those limiting pictures people carry in their heads.
It rewrites the narrative. It quietly asserts, we belong here, too.
Dad had shown me the power of confronting ignorance not with reactive anger, but with quiet competence, with undeniable truth.
Show up. Do the work. Let the excellence speak for itself.
This entire experience, from the sting of Brad's casual cruelty to the quiet triumph of my dad's visit and the subsequent ripples of change, taught me something vital. Something bigger than just surviving 6th grade in the American South. It taught me that while prejudice undeniably exists, a shadow lurking in unexpected corners, the most powerful response often lies not in shouting louder, but in showing clearer. In proving, calmly and confidently, through your actions and your truth, exactly who you are and what you're capable of.
It's a lesson I carry with me still.
Beyond the classroom, the courage to be seen. That lesson, the power of showing, not just shouting, the quiet strength found in undeniable truth over simmering anger, it echoes far beyond the walls of that 6th grade classroom in Oak Haven. It resonates deeply even now, years later, a permanent etching on my understanding of the world. My story, that painful, pivotal experience of being 12 years old and seeing my father's achievements instantly dismissed because of our Korean heritage, is really just one small narrative in a vast, universal library filled with similar struggles against the suffocating weight of prejudice. Looking back, the journey from that stinging moment of public humiliation, Brad's casual cruelty hanging in the air, the wave of laughter confirming my otherness, to the eventual, fragile truce achieved in that classroom wasn't instantaneous. It wasn't a Hollywood ending where everyone suddenly saw the light and held hands. Validation didn't arrive overnight with trumpets' fanfare. It arrived quietly, carried in my father's calm voice, reflected in his NASA ID badge, and slowly, imperfectly, absorbed by my classmates. It arrived in Callie's awkward apology by the lockers, in Jesse's sudden, genuine curiosity about Mars rovers, even in Brad Jenkins's grudging, embarrassed silence. Confidence wasn't gifted, it was forged in the fire of facing that fear, bolstered by my father's unwavering support and the slow dawning of acceptance, however incomplete, from my peers. The central theme, the truth that settled deep in my bones through that ordeal, is this: prejudice often feeds on the shadows of ignorance and assumption. It thrives in the spaces where stereotypes substitute for real human connection. But it often shrinks, falters, and sometimes even begins to crumble when confronted not just with righteous fury, though goodness knows, the anger is often justified, but with the clear, calm light of reality. My Appa didn't need to raise his voice or engage in angry debate. His presence, his quiet expertise, his calm explanation of complex ideas, his patient willingness to answer questions, that was the counter-argument. His truth, presented without apology but with gentle confidence, became the antidote to the poison of their baseless disbelief. And isn't that true far beyond the confines of Oak Haven Middle? We all navigate a world quick to categorize, to judge based on appearance, background, accent, or any other marker of perceived difference. We build walls based on assumptions, limiting our own understanding and denying the full humanity of others. My specific experience revolved around being Korean American in the South and having a dad doing something extraordinary, but the underlying dynamic, facing down stereotypes, fighting for the right to be seen and believed for who you truly are, is a depressingly universal challenge. It makes you realize the quiet power, the potential ripple effect, of individual courage. My father's courage, stepping willingly into a space where he knew he might face the same ignorance his daughter had. My own courage, first in sharing my pride, then in asking for help, and now, in sharing this story. These acts, seemingly small pebbles tossed into the pond of indifference or hostility, can create waves. Maybe they changed one mind, maybe they planted a seed of doubt in another, maybe they simply made someone think twice before echoing a harmful stereotype. You rarely see the full extent of the ripples, but they spread nonetheless. Overcoming prejudice often begins with that first, uncomfortable step, the courage to show up, to speak your truth, even if your voice shakes, to simply be, authentically and unapologetically. Silence lets the shadows deepen. So, perhaps the real takeaway isn't just about my specific victory against sixth-grade ignorance. It's an invitation. An invitation to examine our own assumptions, to question the boxes we place ourselves and others in. It's an encouragement to find your own calm proof when you face down disbelief or discrimination in your own life, whatever form that proof might take. And maybe, most importantly, it's a call to be an ally, to offer support, to amplify unheard voices, and to actively challenge prejudice when you encounter it, rather than standing by in uncertain silence. Find your truth. Speak it, live it, calmly and clearly. And perhaps just as vital, listen, truly listen, with an open heart, to the complex and varied truths of others. That's where understanding begins. That's how we start building bridges across the divides that keep us apart.